Hey guys, look, there's been some stories. I think the biggest story right now in the media has been the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. And if you look at how she has been portrayed, uh, she has largely, both here at home in South Africa and globally, has been portrayed as this graceful woman who has ruled Great Britain and the Commonwealth with so much grace. Uh, you go to the US, you go to the UK, Australia. Every news channel has no shortage of good things to say about Queen Elizabeth, and in part, I understand why that is the case. These are countries that are predominantly white and English speaking countries. So, from that point of view, you understand why they would have no shortage of compliments and good things to say about her legacy. So, there is no question, there's no doubt there. However, her legacy in other areas, one in Africa, the Caribbean, Australia, it's not so simple. And let me try to explain why her legacy in some of these regions or areas is not that simple. This way, in fact, I think in as recent as recently, few months or a year ago, there are communities in Kenya whose land has since been taken over or stolen by Unilever to plant tea of all things. Yeah, tea. People lost their livelihoods. Uh, they lost their land so that Unilever and other British companies could plant tea. That those communities, those people have in the last 10, 12 years perhaps been trying to get attention of the British government in order for them to seek reparation. They have been to the ends of the world in their quest to get reparation, or at least have British government acknowledge their pain and their suffering, to no avail. Every corner they took, they were met with stone silence. It's inconceivable to think that Queen Elizabeth would not have known about this. It is highly improbable to say that Queen Elizabeth would not have known about this because her government knew. Members of House of Commons, which is the parliament in the UK, knew about these people, but British government did nothing. In fact, refused to negotiate with these people, or at the very least, talk to them. We know what led to some of the problems we have in Zimbabwe. At the heart of the problem that we had in Zimbabwe was President Mugabe's insistence that British government keep up with the promise they've made to pay for the land that was stolen by white people, mostly British people in Zimbabwe. And when that did not happen, President Mugabe allowed indigenous Zimbabweans to take over the land or the farms owned by British farmers in Zimbabwe. And that unfortunately led to the situation as we see it today in Zimbabwe. There are many cases, many around the world, where British Empire left destruction and disaster in its wake. And this happened in that 70-year period when Queen Elizabeth was on the throne. So it's very, very difficult to understand or to simply say Queen Elizabeth led with grace. She was well revered. She blah 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 blah. While when you turn the corner, somewhere in Africa, somewhere in the Caribbean, there is a community that was left disadvantaged by the British Empire. And her legacy, now in her passing, should be able to encapsulate all these things, should be able to include all this, the good and the bad. You see, this will sound a little controversial to try to draw the parallels between President Mugabe and Queen Elizabeth. But there are. Hear me out. The difference between President Mugabe and Queen Elizabeth, I think there are two main reasons. President Mugabe, in his attempt to fight for his people, he ended up making his people suffer. In his attempt to fight for his people, to restore their dignity, unfortunately, he ended up making his people suffer. In that he would not allow himself to negotiate with both the US and the UK. And ultimately, when those two superpowers imposed sanctions on Zimbabwean economy and government, unfortunately, his people suffered. These are tens of thousands of Zimbabweans who suffered. Whereas Queen Elizabeth presided over the empire, on the empire that made millions, tens and millions of people in Africa, the Caribbean, and elsewhere suffer, especially if you're brown-skinned or black-skinned. Queen Elizabeth saw it all. Queen Elizabeth presided over those activities of her government. But second difference between President Mugabe and Queen Elizabeth, and which is very, very important. Queen Elizabeth's government, the British government, controlled the narrative. What is being said, what is told, what has been written about the monarch. President Mugabe did not. President Mugabe did not control the narrative of what was written about him, his government, and his government's actions. That's why to his last day, President Mugabe was known to be this monster, this selfish, heartless monster. And yet his impact, comparatively to that of Queen Elizabeth's empire, cannot even be compared. This was just something that I've been thinking about, and especially because my son came to me over the weekend telling me about the passing of Queen Elizabeth. Of course, I had already known, but I think he had picked up from school, and then he came to me and said, "Daddy, do you know Queen Elizabeth has passed on? She's been a monarch for 70 years, and people loved her, Daddy." And I wanted to tell him to say, "Hang on, my boy, before you rush into saying that people loved Queen Elizabeth, there is a side that you might not know about Queen Elizabeth, that you would probably not be told by white people in South Africa or white people anywhere around the world, that news channels in South Africa will not be very keen to talk about." But I felt like, you know what? He is not the only person who does not know the full legacy or the true legacy of Queen Elizabeth. There are many adults here at home and elsewhere, black and brown, and these are the two skin tones that were affected the most by British Empire, but they don't know that history because British government has done so well to paint British monarch as this divine-like institution, while the reality is something else. So I felt like maybe I needed to pass my few cents worth of commentary on the issue. Uh, I'm not going to go any as far as